This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ephraim Graham. We begin this half hour taking a look at the caravan of migrants making their way from Central America. They've advanced about 45 miles since crossing the border from Guatemala, with more than 1,000 miles to go on the journey to reach the United States. It is unclear if the president will take unilateral action to reduce foreign aid or if he'll close the southern border and arm it with troops. Heritage Foundation senior policy analyst Ana Quintana says former Honduran legislator Bartolo Fuentes is behind the caravan. Fuentes is a member of the radical leftist Libre Party, and Quintana says Libre is not a political party, but a destabilizing movement. CBN News contributor Chuck Holton is in Mexico covering the caravan. He joins us now by phone. So, Chuck, there are reports of 7,000 people in the caravan. What are you seeing there? All right, we'll make efforts to get back to Chuck Holton in just a little bit. We've somehow lost our connection with him. President Donald Trump campaigned for Texas Senator Ted Cruz in Houston last night with his latest speech catchphrase, "Jobs, not mobs." CBN's Jenna Browder spoke with Tucker Carlson of Fox News about the mobs and how the media is or is not covering them.
Many of you know Tucker Carlson from Fox News, and now he's out with a new book, Ship of Fools, How a Selfish Ruling Class is Bringing America to the Brink of Revolution. I sat down with him to talk about it, then also another topic that's on a lot of people's minds right now, left-wing violence and protests. Meltdown in America, from Portland and San Francisco to the Supreme Court. Many on the left are making their voices heard, sometimes in extreme ways.
Are you gonna let our democracy die?
So the Democratic Party obviously isn't in control of its crazy people on the street, okay? Those people are committing acts of violence. They don't want to admit that because they know it scares normal people. I mean, normal people who might vote Democrat are watching television. There's like an angry group of rich kids screaming at somebody or smashing car windows. They're not into that. Normal people are not into that at all. Even Democrats aren't into that. So the Democratic Party has to pretend it's not happening, and so immediately the media start telling you, no, there are no mobs.
When you see people like Ted Cruz getting chased out of restaurants by a mob.
You're not going to use the mob word here.
It's totally a mob.
Carlson says the media's problem is more than just a liberal-leaning bias.
They're not liberal. They're water carriers for the Democratic Party. If you want to know the way the media will present the news, look at what the Democratic Party's political objective is for the day. What are the party's talking points? And then go watch CNN, and they're identical.
But what about those who say there's also violence on the right?
Well, that's not true. I mean, are there crazy people on the right? Yeah, of course. Obviously. There are extremists on all sides, for sure. But what there isn't on the right now, and maybe it will change, but I'm trying to be as honest as I can be, there aren't groups of conservatives screaming at Democratic lawmakers in restaurants or on airplanes or in airports, and they're not actually smashing Starbucks windows and blocking traffic. I mean, that's Antifa. I mean, just as a matter of fact, being as honest as we can, right now in 2018, violent demonstrations on the street are overwhelmingly of the left. And this is the youth wing of the Democratic Party. So maybe that will change. But right now, why are we lying about this? These are progressives doing this, not conservatives.
The political temperature in America right now is no doubt hot. And come November, the controversy over the mob could be a factor to motivate voters. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
All right. Thank you, Jenna, for that report. Turning now to another same-sex wedding cake battle that may make its way all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Aaron and Melissa Klein shut down their Oregon business after a state agency fined them some $135,000 for not baking a cake for a gay wedding. The Kleins are now appealing that decision to the nation's highest court. The Kleins are making that appeal with First Liberty attorney Kelly Shackelford, who said the case will clarify whether speech is truly free or if it is government mandated. Chief Justice John Roberts says he is saddened at the news that Sandra Day O'Connor has begun the stages of dementia. O'Connor is the first woman to serve on the nation's Supreme Court. Roberts said in a statement Tuesday, although O'Connor has announced she is withdrawing from public life, no illness or condition can take away the inspiration she provides for those who will follow the many paths that she has blazed. President Donald Trump has sent CIA Director Gina Haspel to Turkey to get more information about the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi and to weigh in on the possible U.S. response. In a parliament speech, Turkey's president said the 59-year-old Washington Post columnist was murdered and it was premeditated by a 15-man Saudi hit squad. Reports say 7 of the men involved in the murder reportedly belong to Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince protection detail.
My call is first and foremost to Saudi Arabia's King Salman and to senior administration. Istanbul is where the incident took place. Therefore, my offer is for these 15 people, plus 3 people, the 18 arrested, to be tried in Istanbul.
After weeks of denial, Saudi Arabia said Khashoggi, who was often critical of the Saudi royal family, was killed in a fistfight inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October 2nd. President Donald Trump says he is not satisfied with the explanation he's heard from the Saudis thus far. Mexico is prepping as an approaching Category 4 hurricane is likely to bring life-threatening storm surge, wind, and rainfall. The Hurricane Willa is expected to make landfall Tuesday afternoon along Mexico's Pacific coast. A decree of extraordinary emergency was issued and more than 7,000 people have been evacuated. The storm is then expected to move inland and upward as its impact could be felt in Texas sometime this week. Health workers say they are seeing signs of mental stress in residents more than a week after Michael, and problems could continue through a long-term recovery that will take years. Counselors with medical teams assisting with the disaster say some of them are seeing as many as 100 patients a day. They report some people are showing signs of fraying. Indications of trauma aren't surprising to those who study people after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. One post-Katrina study found widespread problems in children. Coming up, why the movie Gosnell may not be easy and why it is being censored. We've got that story for you coming up here on CBN NewsWatch right after this break. And welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. We began this half hour taking a look at the caravan of migrants making their way from Central America. We want to go now to CBN News contributor Chuck Holton. He's in Mexico covering that caravan. So, Chuck, there are reports of 7,000 people in this caravan. What are you seeing there?
Well, I would say there are probably more than that. What I'm being told by the members of the caravan is that the main group has about 7,000, but this all the media coverage has spawned quite a bit more people to decide to join the caravan. So there are other smaller side groups that are traveling maybe several miles behind or several miles in front of the main body, which again is probably about 7,000 people, and they are currently resting at the Catholic Church in a little town called Huixtla, which is north of Tapachula.
Well, as we were talking to you, we're looking at images of some of those migrants. Now, you say the worst part is militant men are bringing women and children with them. What are the conditions like for them?
Well, it's very hot out here, and what I was saying is that there are the majority of the migrants in this group are military-age males, but they have some percentage, I would say maybe about 20% or so of females and children. And they've figured out that with those women and children, they have great power, because I would venture to say that if it was only military-age males coming across, that they would have been stopped by the police and arrested and deported. But as I just witnessed about an hour ago, one group of migrants that were confronted by some immigration agents along with Mexican federal police, and they immediately just got into a very belligerent shouting match and then ran off. And it really puts these police and the immigration officials between a rock and a hard place, because if this many people don't want to comply, then they don't really have any other option, because they're not going to shoot a bunch of women and children, and they're not going to, tackle them and throw them in vans or anything like that. As a matter of fact, I saw one federal police truck that stopped a couple and grabbed the man and threw him in the back of the truck and drove off and left the woman standing there. And so these migrants have learned that the women and children story is very valuable to their effort, and that's why they
Looks like we've lost our connection with Chuck Holton. They're reporting in Mexico for us today. Turning now to the movie highlighting the atrocities in the abortion clinic of Dr. Kermit Gosnell. It finished in the top 10 at the box office opening weekend. However, it may not be in theaters much longer. The filmmakers are asking why so many theaters have dropped the movie despite its popularity. They're also reporting moviegoers being prevented from buying tickets to the movie and tell the Christian Post there are too many incidents to simply be dismissed. And joining us now with more is Dan Gaynor from the Media Research Center. So Dan, it's great to have you with us. Tell us what you can about what's happening with this movie.
First of all, this is a fantastic movie. Fela McAleer and Ann McEnany did this movie. They basically created it with the force of their own will because this is such an important story. So the news media who suppressed this horrendous story at trial, it was trial for 2 months. The press room, ordinarily a sensational crime trial like this, wall-to-wall journalists from all sorts of outlets, it was vacant. The news media who suppressed this story then now are suppressing the story even now. They don't want to review it. They don't want to write about it. They don't want to tell people about it. They don't want to look into why the movie's being chased out of theaters or moviegoers are finding it difficult to get in. So this has become almost exclusively a conservative movement, pro-life movement story. And this is how the major media suppress everything. We get so fixated in our society about bias by commission when somebody says something stupid or something awful that we forget the number one form of media bias is what we're seeing here, what we saw at the trial, is the media bias by omission, where they just don't tell you what's really going on.
Now, Dan, we know that the movie is making money, so how do you explain what's happening? It's hard to believe a movie being pulled that was actually bringing in money.
I've seen some really garbage movies last at the box office for a while because somebody in Hollywood, somebody important liked it. Nobody important likes this movie in Hollywood. They want this movie to go away. Forget that you've got a major star, Dean Cain, in there. Forget you've got a really compelling performance for the actor who plays Kermit Gosnell. Forget all that. Forget that this serves a branch of the audience that Hollywood loves to forget about. This is, like American Sniper. If you had promotion behind this, if you had theaters not pulling this movie, it would be doing well because there's a lot of people interested. And then you throw in the people who like crime movies. They do really well in the box office. So what we're seeing is what we see traditionally in the news media, is we're seeing suppression of other thought. And Hollywood excels at doing that.
Have you seen this before, something like this happen before?
Well, I mean, I think we see this all the time. We just saw the disappearance and then eventual reappearance of Last Man Standing. You look at the number of conservative shows on TV, you look at the number of conservative movies that come out, and I mean, it's almost non-existent. You've got to dig through the sort of popular movies like the Avengers or superhero movies to find conservative themes. But actual conservative movies, pro-America, pro-life, traditional family movies, they end up getting relegated to the Hallmark Channel on television because the major networks don't like them and Hollywood doesn't want to make them.
What is so disturbing about all the pushback this movie has received from the time it was being produced until now, that this has been ongoing from the very beginning?
Well, it's disturbing that Hollywood can silence something this awful, just like the government and the left silenced this crime. I mean, this was going on. They had no nurses in this facility repeatedly. And ultimately, I mean, this is how the poor were being abused in Pennsylvania. And nobody cared because for the left, abortion has become akin to a sacrament. And you don't ever run afoul of it. So the result is this went on, this heinous, monstrous butcher shop of an abortion facility went on for a long time. Then nobody cared because of what it was about.
All right, Dan Gaynor, thank you so much for your time. Always appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Still ahead, we're going to take a look at why Christians have been persecuted through the ages. The story's coming up next. Stay with us. Christianity was persecuted right from the start, with thousands of its earliest disciples killed or jailed. So what made the faith so compelling converts would risk their lives for their faith? David Limbaugh explores the answers in his new book, Jesus is Risen. He tells our Paul Strand it has to do with a Savior resurrecting his worst persecutor and making him a fiery advocate.
Christianity was persecuted from its beginning, with thousands of its earliest converts killed or jailed. So what made it so compelling that these early disciples were willing to die for it? In his new book, Jesus is Risen, David Limbaugh gives some reasons, like the fact that the disciples preached Jesus' resurrection right from the very start, that its worst persecutor, Paul, became its most fiery advocate, and that this new religion welcomed all mankind. Some say that the idea of Jesus' resurrection and divinity was added decades later, that the early apostles and believers didn't believe that. Tell me about that.
That's absurd on its face. Paul wrote in one of his letters, if Jesus Christ wasn't crucified, dead and buried, and then resurrected in his body, then Christians are the most to be pitied, because we've lived all our lives devoted to Christ and it's all a myth. His bodily resurrection is central to Christianity. His coming in history, his intervening in history as God and human, and dying and then being resurrected. And of course they believed it from the very first, which is why there was so much controversy. One of the main reasons there was controversy. The truth is the gospel was always as the gospel is today.
I know at the start that they were mostly preaching to Jews, but tell us about the first Gentile who was converted.
Cornelius was a Roman centurion who wasn't steeped in the Jewish law. And he was it was a cold call, so to speak. But God gave Peter a vision that from a carpet coming down with unclean animals, and eat these, God said in the vision, or the angel. And Peter said, I can't eat those, they're unclean. So then he arranges for Cornelius, who also had a vision, to meet, make a long story short. And Peter ends up converting Cornelius and his family through faith in Jesus Christ. There's no one different. All are the same under Christ. No Jew, no Gentile, no Greek, no slave, no free person. We're all one in Christianity. And that vision of the unclean animals was to let him know God makes nothing unclean. This is a new covenant now. We're all able to come together and be saved through Jesus Christ.
Your book is about the book of Acts and the first 6 letters that Paul wrote. Do you find in there that a message that anybody is so evil, so unreachable, so bad that they cannot be saved?
No, Paul was an Orthodox Jew, and he was the most unlikely person to be saved, but he was confronted by Christ on the Damascus Road and converted personally by Christ. Why are you persecuting me? Not why are you persecuting the church. Persecution of the church was persecution of Jesus Christ, and he personalized it for Paul. And so he converted Paul to be the lead evangelist to the Gentiles, but he chose Paul because he was so passionate and such an ardent, sincere person and so relentless. And so he spread the gospel, forming and planting all these churches. But no one is beyond the love of Jesus Christ unless they place themselves away from it, unless they outright rebel and reject him. But that's a matter of volition. I believe in free will. But he has opened himself up to anyone. You knock and I'll open the door. Seek and you shall find.
Could you say Paul's most effective techniques and arguments for making converts to the faith, what would you say was his best?
His main thing was he would take people as he found them. He would not sweat the small stuff. Around Jews, he would adopt Jewish practices, but he would never betray his faith. Do whatever made people comfortable so he could evangelize. It's kind of like Ravi Zacharias says, know the questioner as well as the question. Understand who you're talking to. Don't be a scold. Don't be a legalist. Try to relate to them on their own terms, and then give them the truth about the God of the universe, the Savior, Jesus Christ, because that's a universal language we can all understand regardless of our cultures.
Coming up, a team of football players take the matter of pregame prayer into their own hands. We've got the story for you. Stay with us. And welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. I want to take you now to Georgia, where a group of high school football players are continuing their tradition of praying before games, even after a pastor was stopped from praying with them. Georgia pastor Russell Davis often prayed with the Dawson County football team before games. It was something they did regularly. That is until a video of him praying with that team went viral. Then the Freedom from Religion Foundation stepped in and sent a letter to the school district demanding that they get rid of the pastor. District officials decided instead to prevent staff members and volunteers from praying with students. The players did not, though, let that stop them from praying on their own. As you see there in the video, they bow their heads, they join hands, and they acknowledge God on their own and perfectly within their right to do so. God bless those students for standing up for their faith and continuing to pray. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, you can always find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We'd also love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Remember, the news continues 24/7 at cbnnews.com. Goodbye and God bless.